The army was as black as ink. The general was blacker still. This would establish African military control. Now, the Arabs did not come into Spain in large numbers until much later. And the Arabs were never in complete control in Spain. The Africans came in at a time, literally, and rescued the Jewish population from the persecution by the Visigoths and formed a partnership between the Africans and the Jews that lasted throughout the whole of this period and helped to give the Jews their second golden age in Spain. But there are so many partnerships that we have entered into with other people that they have forgotten. They have forgotten. I attended a conference 2 years ago to deliver a paper on the myth of black anti-Semitism, and another person delivered a paper on the genesis of black anti-Semitism. What the hell are you talking about? There is no genesis. Because there is no historical record of dissension between blacks and Jews. And the present day dissension is strictly 20th century and strictly urban. And urban within the last 20 years at that. I'm not going to get too further into this because I got too many other things to do. But my point is that with the decline of Europe, with the decline of Rome, and Europe going into the Middle Ages, saw the rise of Islam and the African military arm of Islam becoming predominant in the Mediterranean, especially in Spain. Now, in the 1450s, this period was over. And fortunately for Europe and unfortunately for Africa, some of the maps that the Jewish gold dealers had used to go down into the western Sudan and along the coast of West Africa fell into the hands of a man called Henry the Navigator. Now, there's no proof that Henry ever went to sea, but the one thing he did which helped Europe in its expansion was to start schools to train people in navigational sciences. But most of the information in navigational science and marine engineering came out of the advanced technology then coming out of China. And it was with this technology Europe used to unlock itself. Now, one of the main reasons why most of the maps were made by Jewish gold dealers, it is because some of the Jews in Spain had come from North Africa and they could handle Indo-African languages. And their relationship with the people in Inner Africa was very good and had been very good for years. Even the years after the dispute the Jews had with Rome, they went down and lived for 400 years, a whole Jewish colony, lived in ancient Ghana. Now, this is totally left out of Jewish history, as though it didn't even happen at all. But a Father Williams, who's a little overly partial in the subject, has written a book called Hebrewisms of West Africa. Now, Father Williams tried to prove that everything in West Africa is Jewish. Everything. And more so to the point that after Ghana became independent, some Ghanaian students wanted to impress white people, said that, now, I must tell you that we are one of the lost tribes of Israel. I got tired of the nonsense. I said, look, they only lost 12 tribes, now 30 shows up. Now, some of you people didn't get lost. But if you really want to know the history of the Jewish population in North Africa to the nations in Inner Africa, I mean, there is information on this. But now, the 1400s were bad times for Africa because these were the times that Europe had learned the technique of expansion and had made the kind of boats it needed to take the roar of that mighty ocean and to go on long-range trips. Now, using some of these maps, the Portuguese at first would come down the west coast of Africa. And they would come down the west coast of Africa, not looking for slaves at first, but hearing the legends about the great gold of Africa. Their first trip was to look for gold, look for allies. They had heard about Prester John. And they were looking for Prester John. They were looking on the wrong side of Africa anyway. And besides, he was dead 300 years when they got there. But they'd heard about Sonny Alley. They misspelled his name, but they'd heard about it. They'd heard about Mansa Musa and the famous journey to Mecca and Medina. This man in 1324 went on a journey out of Africa across, being a devout Muslim, to pay his respects, taking with him 280 camels, each with 250 pounds of gold. 500 men marching in front of his entourage with staffs of pure gold. 50 royal hairdressers, and he only had his favorite wives. From 60 to 100,000 people moving across Africa. He married so many of his people into the countries through which he traveled. And on his way home, he said, we shouldn't fight each other now because we are relatives. When he arrived in Egypt, El Amari, a historian, made an account of it. They say, he is Africa, there is nothing else. And though he was a devout Muslim, the Grand Caliph of Islam was in Egypt and asked to see him, to see this man, the great gold king from West Africa. We ain't talking about no savages. Ain't no savage had nothing like this. No organized state, empire, almost as large as the land territory of the United States, with governors and viceroys. Europe was wallowing in its Middle Ages then. European kings didn't even have good shoes when this was happening. And the mats for his horses were made out of better material than European kings were wearing at the time. At the same time. This is an age of grandeur in Africa. No savagery. The savage was an invention. And this man decided that he would see the Grand Caliph, but he let him know that he was the equal of any man in Islam. And the general custom when you meet the head of the Muslim faith is to remove his shoes and kiss his feet and remove your shoes, but he don't kiss yours. And he said, no time. We will meet as equals or we will not meet at all. And he was as devout a Muslim as ever. The main thing that this man did was that he went back, taking an architect named Ibn Asad, and he rebuilt the Western Sudan, the countries that enter West Africa, Timbuktu and the like. And he opened a great university called Sankore at Timbuktu. Now, it seems very odd for you to understand this because white historians said there was no higher learning in Africa, nothing. But there were 4 universities in Timbuktu as late as 1594 when the Moroccans destroyed it. 4 universities. And Timbuktu was not the leading university city in Western Africa. It was the city of Dijon. Now, the African was in serious trouble and did not know he was in serious trouble. And the year 1492 helped to set that serious trouble in motion. Now, I have alluded to the New World discovery and Christopher Columbus's accidental ending up navigational error that put him on one side of the world instead of the other. I'm sorry he didn't get to the East Indies. These people were more sophisticated in the East Indies, and he would never have seen home again. Had he pulled the stuff in the East Indies that he pulled on the Indians in the West Indies, they would have washed him. That would have been the end of that. And I'm sorry about the navigational error. He should have gotten to the East Indies. But Columbus set in motion